Somewhere between $0 and $1 million, your brain quietly flips 3 times. Not gradually, not smoothly. 3 specific moments where money stops feeling like stress and starts feeling like something else entirely, and almost nobody sees the third one coming. Because it doesn't feel anything like what you expect. Before we get into it, quick heads up. This video is for education and general information only. It's not personalized financial advice, and none of the numbers here should replace an actual conversation with a licensed financial advisor about your own situation. Every statistic you're about to hear is pulled from real 2026 research, and I'll be walking through exactly where those numbers came from as we go. If breakdowns like this are useful to you, hitting subscribe helps this channel keep making them. And if you know someone stuck staring at their bank account, wondering if any of this is working, send them this one. All right, let's get into it. Most people assume money changes your life on a straight line. More income, a little less stress. More savings, a little more comfort. Slow and steady, up and to the right. But that's not what actually happens to people who track this stuff for years. Life doesn't change gradually with money. It changes in jumps, specific thresholds where something shifts internally. And according to the data, there are 3 of them. Not 5, not 10, 3. And the one everyone's chasing the hardest might turn out to be the smallest emotional jump of the 3. Let's start at the bottom, because before we talk about freedom, we have to talk about survival. And right now, in 2026, this line matters more than it has in years. According to Bankrate's newest emergency savings report, 27% of Americans have $0 set aside for an emergency. Not low. 0, that's the highest number ever recorded since this survey started tracking it. And 59% of the country could not cover a surprise $1,000 expense without going into debt. That's the world most people are actually living in. 1 car repair, 1 emergency room visit, 1 slow month at work. That's all it takes to unravel everything. So when someone crosses $10,000 in savings, it doesn't look like much from the outside. Nobody throws a party for $10,000. But internally, it's enormous. Here's why. At this stage, almost none of that money came from investment growth. It came from you, from showing up every single month, from saying no to things you wanted, from consistency, when consistency was boring, invisible, and nobody was watching. That's exactly why this number gets called the point of no return. Not because $10,000 is life-changing on its own, it isn't, but because it's proof. Proof that you're someone who follows through. And once your brain has that proof, quitting stops feeling like an option. Because quitting would mean throwing away evidence of who you've already become. There's a version of this that gets even more interesting. Take someone investing just $50 a month starting in their 20s. After about 11 hard, unglamorous years grinding through market dips, doing everything manually, they hit around $10,000. If they never add another dollar again, growth alone could carry that to roughly $48,500 20 years later. More than $38,000 of that would be pure growth they didn't have to work for. That engine is already running inside that first $10,000. You just can't see it yet. There's actually a name for this tier in newer wealth mapping research. Some banks now call the $10,000 to $100,000 range grocery freedom, the point where you can buy what you actually want at the store without doing math in your head at the checkout. It sounds small. It's not. Ask anyone who's lived without it. This is the first shift. Not lifestyle, not luxury. Identity. You stop being someone trying to save money, and you become someone who does save money. That's a different person walking into the next stage. If $10,000 is proof you can do this, $100,000 is proof the money can start doing it without you. Some finance educators literally call this the millionaire-making milestone, and the math explains why. In the early stages, almost all your growth comes from your own deposits, your effort, your discipline, your sacrifice. But somewhere between 10,000 and 100,000, the balance of power flips. Compounding starts pulling more weight than your monthly contribution does. Picture two people. One is dragging a sled uphill by hand. The other has strapped a motor to it. For years, both of them look like they're moving at roughly the same pace. But around $100,000, the motor turns on. From here, the account can grow more in one strong year than it did across several early years of manual saving. This is also where a strategy called coast fire becomes real for a lot of people. The idea is simple: front-load your investing hard while you're young. Hit a number like $100,000 relatively early, and theoretically, you could stop adding new money altogether and let decades of compounding carry you toward a comfortable retirement. Realistically, almost nobody hits six figures at 35 and then coasts for 30 years doing absolutely nothing. That's not really the point. The point is how much force that $100,000 mark actually carries once you reach it. It's the difference between rowing a boat and finally catching the current. In that same wealth mapping research, the 100,000 to 1 million range gets called restaurant freedom. You can eat what you want, when you want, without checking the right side of the menu first. And psychologically, this is where a lot of people report their first real exhale. Bills stop feeling like a threat. A bad month at work doesn't spiral into panic. You're still nowhere close to rich, but for the first time, the money starts working for you instead of the other way around. It's worth pointing out that 2026 has been a strange year to be sitting in this stage. Interest rates have been cut, which is good news if you're carrying debt, but it also quietly reduces what your cash and bonds earn while you're building towards six figures. At the same time, the stock market has kept grinding forward. So the split between people who kept investing through the noise and people who pulled back and sat in cash has gotten wider than usual. The gap between level 2 and level 3 this year has less to do with income and more to do with who stayed invested when things felt uncertain. Now here's where the story gets uncomfortable. Because almost everyone assumes hitting $1 million feels like winning. It doesn't, at least, not the way people expect. One financial writer describing the exact moment he crossed seven figures in his late 20s said he expected fireworks. What he actually felt was relief mixed with a strange letdown, because his life looked exactly the same the next morning. Same apartment, same car, same coffee order. Nothing visibly changed. This isn't just one person's story. It shows up repeatedly in actual research on millionaires. A study surveying millionaires across 17 different countries found that happiness plateaus almost immediately after crossing $1 million. People sitting at 1 million and people sitting at 2 million reported roughly the same life satisfaction. The next real bump doesn't show up until somewhere around $8 million, a number the overwhelming majority of people will never see in their lifetime. There's a cultural gap fueling a lot of this disappointment. When most of us picture a millionaire, we picture yachts, mansions, red carpets, Gatsby, Bond, a game show host. But today, roughly 1 in 4 American households already qualifies as a millionaire on paper, once you count home equity and retirement accounts. The word hasn't caught up to how common it's become. A lot of new millionaires look around, don't see a private jet anywhere near their life, and quietly assume they must be doing something wrong. They're not. The definition moved. and nobody sent the memo. And 2026 data makes this even clearer. Even people who are genuinely wealthy by any historical definition often don't feel it. A recent survey found that among people holding between $500,000 and $3 million in assets, only about 1 in 3 actually say they feel wealthy. Across the general population, that number drops to just 12%. Location makes it worse. There are people sitting on close to $4 million in net worth in cities like San Francisco who say their day-to-day life hasn't changed at all. Same car, same grocery runs, same worries about layoffs, because in that specific zip code, 4 million barely covers upper middle class. There's also newer psychology research worth mentioning here because it updates something you've probably heard before, the old idea that happiness plateaus at $75,000 a year in income. A more recent, larger study revisited that claim and found it wasn't quite right. For most people, well-being actually keeps climbing as income rises, just with smaller and smaller gains each time, diminishing returns, not a hard wall. The one exception is a smaller group of people already struggling with real unhappiness, for whom more money doesn't move the needle much at all. So the plateau story wasn't wrong exactly, it was incomplete. So what actually does change at $1 million if it's not fireworks? Control. That's the real shift. You stop making decisions out of fear and start making them out of choice. You're no longer taking a job because you're desperate for the paycheck, you're taking it because you want to. That's not a loud transformation. It's a quiet one. But according to everyone who's actually lived through it, it's the one that matters most. And if you're curious what comes after this level, the same wealth mapping research gives it a name too. The 1 million to 10 million range gets called travel freedom, where you go where you want, when you want, without the trip itself being the financial event. Almost nobody watching this is anywhere near that tier yet, and that's completely fine. It's not the point of this video. The point is that each of these labels, grocery freedom, restaurant freedom, travel freedom, describes a real lived shift in how safe your brain feels making an everyday decision. None of them describe luxury. They describe the slow removal of low-level, background financial fear. So where does that leave most of us right now heading through 2026? Here's the honest picture. Inflation has pushed prices 26% higher than they were at the end of 2019. Because of that, the number people say they need to feel wealthy keeps climbing. 2 recent surveys put that psychological number above $2.5 million now, more than double what it was a decade ago. To put actual numbers next to that feeling, the top 10% of American households starts around $970,000 in net worth, and the top 1% requires roughly $11.6 million. Most people significantly overestimate how far ahead of them the wealthy line actually sits. It also helps to know where the typical household actually sits today. According to the Federal Reserve's most recent survey of consumer finances, adjusted forward into 2026 dollars, the median net worth for Americans under 35 is around $39,000. For ages 35 to 44, it's about $135,000. It climbs to roughly $247,000 by the mid-50s, and peaks around $410,000 for people in their late 60s, right before retirement starts drawing it back down. Notice what that means. The median American in their late 30s hasn't even fully crossed level 2 yet. So if you're sitting below $100,000 right now, you are not behind some invisible curve, you are, statistically, right where most people your age actually are. Meanwhile, more than half of Americans, 53%, say they're living paycheck to paycheck in 2026. And this isn't just low earners. Nearly a third of people earning over $100,000 a year say the exact same thing, which means most people aren't stuck because level 3 is out of reach. They're stuck because they haven't crossed level 1 yet. 27% of the country has zero emergency savings. Zero, not low. Zero, and that's honestly the most useful thing this whole framework reveals. These 3 levels aren't really about becoming rich. They're checkpoints. And most people watching this right now are closer to their next threshold than they think, whether that's the first $10,000 or the 6-figure mark where the math finally starts working in your favor. You don't need $2.5 million to feel a shift. You need to cross the next line. So if there's one thing to take from all of this, it's this. Stop measuring your progress against the finish line and start measuring it against the next threshold. $10,000 proves you can do this. $100,000 means the money starts doing it for you. $1 million buys you control, not confetti. None of those numbers require luck. They require the one thing almost 3 in 10 Americans haven't started yet: the first deposit. If you're below $10,000 right now, that's not a failure. That's just where the story starts. Every single person who eventually crosses all 3 of these lines began exactly where you are right now. If this put words to something you've been feeling for a while, subscribe, because next, we're breaking down exactly how long it actually takes to go from 0 to each one of these numbers based on real income levels. I'll see you in the next one.